What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Morning Brew podcast. I'm your host, Kayla, and I'm interviewing creatives every other week to bring you an authentic conversation about the experience behind their art. Today's episode is a real treat. I'm sitting down with independent musician from Nashville, Jeff Thomas. Not only is he performing a song live for us off of his new album, Evaporate, but we've also partnered to give away one of his limited vinyls for free. Giveaway deals will be on both of our Instagrams, so be sure to head over to Instagram after the episode for that. Before we get started, make sure you're following the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Let's welcome Jeff to the show. Well, hi, Jeff. Thanks for joining the show. I'm so excited to have you. I spoiled your name, but can you introduce yourself to the audience? What's your name? Where are you from?
Absolutely. Jeff Thomas. I live on the outskirts of Nashville, Tennessee.
Awesome. And what do you do?
By night, I am an independent recording artist. I perform, I guess you would call it indie folk, alternative rock. I've got a history with like progressive rock in the indie scene from the mid to late 2000s. And as I've kind of become more seasoned in age, I've progressed to a calmer, more soothing style of music, I guess you could say.
Awesome. And you've agreed to play a song for us today, which I'm super excited about. Can you tell me a little bit more about the song that you've decided to perform for us today?
I would be absolutely happy to. The song that I'm going to play today is actually the newest single I'm releasing on January 2nd. It's called Beattyville, Kentucky. And if you listen to the single, you'll hear that there's a little more involved in it than, one person and an acoustic guitar. But I thought I would give it a shot and see if I could maybe kind of make it its own as an acoustic version. But as far as the song is concerned, what it's about, in 2003, I worked for a nonprofit called Appalachia Service Project, and I was working in a town called Beattyville, Kentucky, which is, of course, what the song is named after. And essentially, when I started working for this company, I consider myself at that point a very religious person, and I think I had like this reckoning where it was the first time in my life I kind of saw that we are who are going to help ourselves. We are the ones who are here working to make better lives for people. Suffice it to say, my faith in any deity kind of started. That was the turning point where I started to kind of turn away from faith and religion, and I started to kind of look more towards faith in humanity and what I could do and how I could contribute to making that better and more wholesome.
That's awesome. I'm so excited to hear the song. So, Jeff, I'm going to go ahead and mute myself, and the floor is yours.
Excellent. All right. Let me grab everything.
Yeah,
and get
no
it.
rush at all.
Appalachia Hills, 2003 Beattyville. I was working for the steeple. No God amongst his people. And I gotta say, just for argument's sake, if it is just us, wouldn't it be great? You touched my heart, you took the shirt right off my back, your mountains moved me as they pulled me to the past. And I gotta say, just for argument's sake, if it is just us, wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great?
That was beautiful. Thank you so much for performing that for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very
Of
much.
course. And so this is the next single to come out off of your album Evaporate, which comes out
Right.
January 16th. I've had the absolute pleasure of listening to this in advance, and I'm super excited to unpack it with you.
I can't wait. I've been looking forward to talking to somebody about this.
I'm so excited. You've had a very interesting journey in music with getting to where you are now and sort of switching genres. For the listeners, could you give a little rundown of sort of your story?
Absolutely. So as I kind of touched on a little bit ago, I started playing music in the, I guess, publicly, in the early mid 2000s, and I was in a indie rock band called Next Year's Best. We had some varying success in the Nashville music scene and even in some of the surrounding areas. We were a little bit before the digital era, though, so we kind of missed out on, we had a MySpace page, if that tells you anything. But I would say that for the most part, I was really kind of into that prog rock scene, the indie rock scene, and then after that, when I started recording and releasing music, I actually started out on doing some like Americana stuff, but then quickly started to kind of revisit the prog rock elements. And then more recently, I started playing with more digital stuff and kind of getting into, some of the more alt rock sounding things. I guess you could compare it a little bit to like Muse or Radiohead, stuff like
Sure.
that. And then I released an album in 2023 called Denoma. And after doing that, I essentially did that as kind of a motivator to myself and as kind of a teachable moment for my kids who are starting to get into music. I wanted to see if I could record an album on an iPhone 12 using GarageBand, and I though I did it successfully, it definitely sounds like an album that was recorded on an iPhone 12. So, I used a bunch of recycled songs that I'd written 15, 20 years ago, and though I'm proud of the record, I would say that I kind of feel detached to it because, I wrote a lot of those songs in a time in my life that was completely different to where I am
Hmm.
today. So, when I started playing and recording again, though, I really kinda opened up the floodgates, so to speak, as far as, writing and everything. So I started writing, and a lot of stuff that was coming out was, stuff from my early recording days, like the Americana, the indie folk stuff that, I'm kind of more into now. And I started, really kind of seeing that there was an album in the works that was coming out of it. So I started working on that pretty much right when I finished Day No Ma and released it. And that's kind of where we are today.
That's so cool. You tackle a lot of really personal topics in this album, such as thoughts about your own mortality, your shifting of faith, and your childhood. Which
Mhm.
song is the hardest to be the most open or vulnerable about?
That's a very good question. I think there are a couple that I could probably go there with, maybe three. The one you just heard, Beattyville, as I mentioned in my explanation for the song, I used to be a very religious person and now I'm not. Though I still have a lot of respect for Christianity and the faith, I actually still, from time to time, even read the Bible, and I still study uh, the Christian faith. I consider myself an atheist today, and I think that revelation was a very bittersweet one for me because it's something that I believed my entire life.
Mhm.
But I would be remiss if I didn't say that the moment that I did have that clarity, that moment where it just kind of all made sense to me, it was a very liberating feeling. Just knowing that, we're in control of our lives and, it's us calling the shots. It just made everything seem a little bit more precious. But there are also, there's the 3rd song, "Sunnyside," as you said, it kinda delves into my childhood, but it also really reflects a lot on, how I saw my father then versus what I've learned of him now. And, I lost my father back in 2019, and so there's been a lot of reflection on that relationship, and it was a good relationship, and at the same time, there's a lot of, I think, buried trauma there from
Mhm.
just things that, we never got to address when he was alive. And then, another one that is very personal to me is, Trade Places, which is a song about my wife's older sister who she lost to cancer back in 2007. And you'll see there's a little bit of a recurring theme. There is a lot of talk about, um, reflecting on mortality through others and my own and everything. But um, Stacy, my sister-in-law, was somebody who was very important to my wife, Naomi. And I never had the chance to meet her. She passed before I even met my wife. So hearing stories about her, hearing her mother talk about her and her sister talk about her and then hearing Naomi talk about her, all these people who've met her and this beacon of light in these people's lives. And I just basically I know her so well through her memory. I've met her husband, I've met her children, but I never had the privilege of meeting her. And, just knowing how important she was to my wife, it makes me not only miss her, a person who I've never met, but it makes me miss the fact that she can't be here for my wife. And so that's kinda the metaphor that I spun into that song was, if I could take myself out of the equation and bring back this person who is so much to her, I would try to do that.
That's super beautiful. And when I was listening and reading the description about that song specifically, it really made me personally reflective as well in seeing a true example of really how when people pass, they really do live on in the memories that we share because like you've just said, you feel like you know this person and you miss her and you haven't met her in person, and I think that's really interesting and beautiful to think about.
Writing that song was so much about the reflection of the emotion of it all, and you kinda said it exactly. There was really not even a moment to enjoy the music that was coming out of it. I was so emotionally invested in, writing that song and just having it come out. It was more of an experience than it was, a musical performance.
That's super interesting, and I'm really glad that you brought that up because I was noting in listening that there are so many wonderful references in your songs to so many different family members. And
Mm.
I was wondering, in your opinion, is it easier or harder to write a song that's dedicated to someone or about someone?
I honestly I've had so many influential people in my life. I would say that it's pretty easy to write about them. I noticed that the lyrics I'm generally when I write songs, I have a melody that comes out and then I try and find lyrics to kind of fit the melody. And historically speaking, if I'm being frank, I've never really felt I was strong as a lyricist. I never felt like my lyrics were very meaningful because I don't think they ever were personal to me before. I was always pulling from inspirational things like, movies that I liked or books, like I wrote an entire song called The Fall of the Rat King that was based off of this animated film inspired by the Nutcracker ballet, that I watched when I was a kid, and I just remember this one scene that, kinda stuck with me, and an entire song came from that one scene. But, as striking as that was, and it's a memorable time for me, that's not really about me, that's just
Sure.
about something that I was interested in. Whereas this entire album, from the beginning to the very end, every single song, I wrote the lyrics first, and then I went back and I found the melody for it. And it was a little bit more of a tolling experience because it took me some time sometimes to kind of find something that fit, and there was a lot of, like, fixing, throughout the process where I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna have to modify the lyrics to,
Mhm.
something else to make it work or whatever," but what I noticed is the lyrical process was much easier for me this time, though, because I was so inspired by some of the people I was writing about. Not only, these family members, my dad, Stacy, God, and, then I wrote about my Aunt Effie. I wrote a couple songs are in there that are about my wife, Naomi, and, there's a lot of stuff in there that really the words just kinda came out of me just because, it's how I felt about these people. It, made the writing process, a little bit easier for me.
That's really interesting. I would have thought from my own personal perspective that it would be like I feel like I would feel an immense sense of pressure to like perfectly capture the essence of one person, but I actually really like that the way you approach this is sort of like a beauty in the authenticity of just way that you feel is what rolls off the tongue, and that's
Yeah.
like the song. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I didn't focus on, like, clever wordplay or even necessarily whether or not something rhymed or not. I wanted to capture the people and the subjects that I was writing about, and I think once I did that, the writing process, it just really simplified, incorporating the melody was a little bit more difficult, and then that
Mhm.
was when, things kinda shifted and things were modified a little bit more, but the initial concept of, writing these songs was much, much easier 'cause, it's a 9-song album, but I actually wrote 60 songs in the course of 2 years that I considered throughout the entire course of the recording process. So there's, 51
Oh
songs
my
that are just
gosh.
sitting on the shelf. So that didn't make it onto the album.
That's crazy. I mean, now I'm curious, out of the 51 songs that didn't make the cut for this particular album, is there any like one song that is like very special to you that should get like special recognition?
Oh, any one song. I could honestly I would say there were 4 songs that were on it up until, like, the last 2 months, and then I pulled them and, put other songs in there. One of them I wrote, it's called Palm Reader. So I served in the military for 8 years, and when I was serving, actually doing my advanced infantry training in Virginia, I had the, experience of going to a palm reader, and, me and my friends, we went, and, I was just kind of perceiving it as this, you're giving general answers kinda thing and
Yeah.
just kinda laughing it off. But when it came my turn, they literally touched my hand for less than a second, it seemed like, and they were like, "Damn, dude, enjoy your life while you can." And I was just like, "Okay, well,
What does
that's
that
not,
mean?
that's not what I paid for."
That's very
That's
ominous.
this experience is different all of a sudden. So based off of that reading, I wrote an entire song, and I thought it was a pretty interesting little tune because, you know, a lot of this can be, like, circumstantial, but, when something like that happens and you go and you have these readings, you start to apply what happens in your life to this reading. You kinda
Yeah.
lead yourself to the answer, or maybe it's not, hocus pocus, it's all real or whatever, but there are instances in my life where I can apply that to, what happened in the reading, and so I wrote about those instances in the song and, referencing, it's kind of a, very bluesy tune,
Mhm.
and the chorus is just one line, it's "Damn palm reader," and, so a lot but I, like, go through these different things that happen, and I talk about that, and then, I mean, there's a few, I had a friend in high school who, you know, in his very early 20s died suddenly in his sleep, no reason, no explanation,
Wow.
and I wrote a song for him, it was called "Boone High," and I'll probably end up releasing some of these songs as singles, later on down the line and everything. But yeah, of the songs that didn't make the album, there are a lot that were quite special. So and you may hear them later on, down the road after Evaporate comes out.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. These sound really interesting, and I'm super curious to hear how you
Yeah,
turn those into a song.
absolutely, yeah.
That's
There
super cool.
I mean, I ran the gamut on what I could handle emotionally in writing this album, so
I believe that.
yeah.
We've said it already. This is a super personal album. So
Amazing.
I'm not a fan of making you choose here, but I am curious off the album, which song are you the most proud of, whether that's a line that was really hard to perfect or one that is just super sentimental? What on this album makes you proud?
Picking one instance, I think, is really hard. If I were to pick one, so one of the very first songs that I recorded, the very first song I recorded actually is the one that ended up, being the first song on the album, which is "We Evaporate." But after that one, it kinda took me a little while to get rolling, but the first one that I actually recorded was the song "Skip to the Part." And I remember just one day that the guitar riff that's in that song, it just kind of came to me. And I had been struggling and struggling and struggling to find a melody for that. And it seemed like when I found just that riff, I sat down with the guitar and I had the lyrics in front of me and I played through the entire thing from beginning to end. I had this euphoric moment where it just all sort of came together. So I started laying down, layers of vocals and, instrumental parts and everything. And before even listening to anything, I just was laying down parts and laying down parts and laying down parts. And then finally, everything in its raw original form, was down. And I just kind of hit play to see if I could kind of make sense of what it was. And it sounded almost like what it sounds like on the final record, just like this vocal sequence that just all kind of comes together and has this very choral moment at the end of the song. That's when I felt like I was really resonating with the material, and the material was helping me find a voice to amplify it.
That's so cool. I love a breakthrough moment like that.
It needed to happen, and it couldn't have happened at a better time, but yeah.
I'm so glad. This is probably one of my favorite questions because I love asking people about this. Can you tell me more about the title and the cover art that you used for the album?
Yeah, absolutely. So Evaporate, the title is simply the metaphor of our mortal existence on the world. Like I think of us as water, and, like water has different stages of existence. And when we pass on, it could be considered the moment that we evaporate, into
Hmm.
air. We become a different chemical composition to the universe. And the album artwork, actually, my wife and I, in the spring, we went to Montana and we went to visit Lake McDonald, which is, very famous national landmark on a national park in Montana. And actually, the very first day while we were there, we were kind of just driving around and sightseeing, trying to see and find, beautiful things to look at. And we found this great area that there was just this river that was kind of flowing in between these hills. And it was just beautiful, and everything was clear and pure. So we pulled over and, we got out and we were taking pictures, and we were kind of strolling further and further away from the road, and all of a sudden I see this spine of this animal that
That's
had
crazy.
been there. And I just at the moment, it was a little bit, startling. And I show Naomi, I'm like, what on earth was that? That looks like that was a big animal. And we kind of were laughing about it. But then I looked at it and I was like, I mean, this is nature. This is nature running its course. This is life beginning, life existing, and life ending. And I just took this picture of it, just because I think in the moment I just kind of started to realize the beautiful story that that scene was telling me. And so I took the picture, and then my wife, she kind of edited the photo to kind of make it, seem like what it is today and everything. But yeah, it was just something that we happened across on a trip to Montana.
That's crazy.
Yeah. It was not something you see every day, I'll admit that.
Yeah, a random spine in the middle of a forest is not something I would expect.
For for a very large vertebrate.
Yeah,
Like it
that's
was.
wow, that's really interesting. I was not expecting
Yeah.
that.
It was definitely, it took us by surprise.
Well, at least it wasn't human. That would have been a whole
Yeah.
other kind of story.
Absolutely. We would probably spent much less time there.
It'd be a very different album if that were the case.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, before we start wrapping things up here, do you want to talk a little bit about 15 Minutes of Fame?
Absolutely. Yeah. So essentially 15 Minutes of Fame is something I started about a year and a half ago. It, for all intents and purposes, it's a little bit of what you do here with your platform. I like to write reviews and do blind reactions and interview artists, independent musicians. And I think probably the primary draw to my platform is the writing the reviews. I write several reviews per month for musicians, and they can come in the forms of like smaller little, what I call spotlight reviews, which might just be like kind of a touch on a single, or something where I can kind of cover a couple artists, two or three artists at a time, and then I might delve a little bit deeper into something that, might be an album, full album release, or something that's been anticipated for a little bit of time. I would say I've featured maybe close to 250 artists by this
That's
point.
cool.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I think we've covered artists in maybe 37 states and 25 countries, and the 25 countries of those, like, we've been on 6 of the 7 continents. So if anybody knows a band of
Whoa.
penguins in Antarctica, hook me up, because that's the only one I'm missing.
That's crazy. That's
Like
super
the
cool.
penguins from Madagascar or something.
Oh, if I find them, I'll hook you up for sure.
There you go. But yeah, it's been pretty awesome. Like, I've featured artists that have as little as, 1 play per month on Spotify, or 1 listener per month on Spotify. And then I've had independent artists who have had more than 1 million monthly listeners on Spotify. A highlight of mine was back in March. So, one of my favorite bands from 25 years ago was this band called Unbelievable Truth out of Oxford, England. And I had the misfortune of discovering them after they had broken up. I
Oh
bought
no.
their first Yeah, I bought their first album at a Tower Records in 2001, and they broke up in 2000.
No.
So when I found them, I basically learned that I have all of the Unbelievable Truth music that I'm ever gonna hear, but I loved it. I loved the music. And for 25 years, I've listened to their music religiously. And so in this span of time, they periodically would kind of come back together and, play a show here and there, but they didn't release any more albums.
Gotcha.
But in 2023, they did a 25-year anniversary live show for their big album that came out in 97 called Almost Here. And after doing that, they basically kind of touched on the idea, the possibility that they would be releasing an album. And I got an email from their manager in October of last year saying, "Hey, I manage this band, Unbelievable Truth, and they are going to be putting out an EP, and we're wondering if, we could sit you guys down for an interview." And I, after falling out of my chair, I
Yeah.
get up and I respond, and turns out, like, not only were they doing an EP, but they ended up releasing an album in September. But in March, I got to sit down and interview Andy York and Nigel Powell, who are the lead singer, guitar player, and the drummer and backing vocalist for Unbelievable Truth. And it was an incredible experience to get to talk to these heroes of mine on my platform,
That's
my
so
dinky little
crazy.
website.
Like, what are the odds?
Yeah.
That's so insane. I don't even
It
know what I would do if that happened.
Yeah, it was honestly, it was an unbelievable moment when they reached out, to talk with me. I was like, "Man, they don't realize how small I am," or something. So I gave them a fair chance. I explained who I was and what I did, and they were like, "That's cool, man. We'll do it."
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, it was so cool. It was amazing, and I've been on cloud 9 all year long listening to their music as it's been coming out and everything, and to have that opportunity to interview them and everything, it was really cool.
That's really awesome. I'm so happy for you. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah, it
gosh.
was awesome. It was really cool.
No, that's dope. I'll definitely have to check out their stuff after this. But like for additional context too for listeners, this is like Tom York's brother, right, from Radiohead.
That's correct. Yeah, Andy
That's
York
insane.
is Tom's younger brother. Radiohead for a long time were my favorite band. and I still very much like them. But if I'm being honest, and if I can pitch Unbelievable Truth a little bit here, Unbelievable Truth is a little more my speed. I would say they're a little more mainstream. They kind of have the alternative, maybe you could call it like the alternative folk vibe, but
Okay.
I like artists like Maggie Rogers and Brandy Carlisle, Bon Iver, The National, and I think Unbelievable Truth kind of fits into that category of music a little more than, like, when you hear Andy's voice, it's unmistakable, like, it's like, "Oh my god, he sounds just like his brother," but the band doesn't really, they have their own thing, and I love that. So when people, go to listen to Unbelievable Truth thinking that they're gonna hear a second version of Radiohead or, like
Hmm.
a junior varsity version, that's
Oh
not
my
what you're
gosh.
gonna get. Yeah, they are their own band,
I
and in
love
a lot
that.
of ways, I think that they're better. And I know that's crazy. I know that's a very much a hot take or whatever, but I mean, I think that they've got something very special going. So yeah, it was a big deal because at the time, Radiohead for a long time was my favorite band, but I've since really grown to love Unbelievable Truth and the stuff they've done.
This is cool on so many levels. Like
Yeah.
truly, if they're looking for other small platforms, I am available.
Uh, I'll put in a good word for you.
Okay, well, I've got a treat for you. So my last segment that I do is called Artists Ask Artists. And so I'm trying to create the world's longest chain of connecting musicians together with other creators. So my last guest has a question for you, and then you can ask
Okay.
literally anything under the sun for my next guest, and we're just going to keep the chain going. And
Amazing. I love that.
my last guest was the songwriting legend Eddie Schwartz, who is responsible for Pat Benatar's "Hit Me with Your Best Shot," and he would like to ask you: do you use generative AI to make music, and if so, in what way do you use it?
I'm going to get on my little pedestal here and say that I use no AI in any of the performing that I do. So the shitty music you hear from me is all me. It's not from
Authentic.
anything else. It's authentically crappy music,
I love
okay?
it.
It's everything that you hear from me is me. Now, when I mastered my first album, because I didn't know how to master and I was working on a very limited budget, I used a mastering AI tool, but that's the only time I've ever incorporated anything that would be remotely AI, and it didn't alter much from the music. It, just threw some compression
Sure.
onto the copy, and then for Evaporate, the gentleman who mixed and did everything, he did that with his pure talent. And if I can throw out a little shout out to
Absolutely.
Daniel Grigson with Neko Records, Evaporate would not be what it is without Daniel. So thank you, Daniel, for everything that you did for that record. He worked as the publisher, as co-producer, and he mastered the record. Not including his stage name is Neko's for Breakfast, and he's featured on a couple of songs on the album as well too. Yeah, it's funny, the little inside story or whatever to how he came up with that or whatever, but they were literally, it was the morning and they were eating
Oh my
Neko's.
gosh.
So that was, and therefore the name of the band. But yeah. But anyways, thank you, Daniel. And then let's see if I can come up with a good question for the next guy. All right. So my question is, if Freddie Mercury were alive today, what would his music sound like and why would it sound like that?
Ooh, okay. A conspiracy. We're gonna start some rumors over here.
Yeah, I wanna hear some, like, open-ended, like, ideas and concepts of would Queen have gone more digital if they were all still
Okay.
together? I know that, a couple of the members still play, but they just basically play their older stuff now. If the whole band were still together, would they have been more experimental with, their sound and everything? Like, could they have maybe done a little bit more into the digital realm of what music became after the 2000s? Or would they have just basically stopped writing new stuff and just, kind of toured like they do now? Or would they have stayed true to the traditional element of what their music was? Because I feel like they were pioneers in experimentation already, and they weren't afraid to be diverse.
Yeah,
So it'd be really interesting to
that's a great point.
see what Freddie Mercury would be doing in the year 2025.
Okay, well, tune into the next episode in January because I'm going to be
Absolutely.
asking the Talbot brothers about this. So now I like to give my guests a platform and a space to do any kind of shameless self promo. So anything you want to promote, where can people find you? Where can people connect with you?
Absolutely. Thank you. So, yeah, I've got a couple little quick ones. So, as we've discussed, I have an album coming out on January 16th, Evaporate. It will be streaming digitally everywhere. It will be on Spotify for a limited time. I am in the process of pulling all of my music off of Spotify, but it will be available everywhere else, and it'll be available for purchase on Bandcamp. Additionally, there is a limited edition LP that is being pressed, and you can purchase the LP at my website, jeffthomasmusic.com. The first single, Drake's Creek Park, released on November 21st. If you would like to go give it a stream, I would love you forever. I will love you forever anyways, but I will also love you forever if you go stream that song. Beattyville, Kentucky is the second single. It's coming out on January 2nd, and I would love it if you showed that one some love as well. If you're an independent artist and you're releasing any new music, please reach out to me at my 15 Minutes of Fame website. That is fmofmusicentertainment.com. You can also email me, Jeff Thomas, at fmofmusicentertainment.com to submit any new music, any music videos. If you're interested in being featured in an interview, I am also starting to do live reviews via YouTube. Not necessarily live so much as it's just a video review, basically. So you hear me talking about an album for 30 minutes. Sounds really monotonous, I know, but
I have watched those videos before.
yeah, it's if anything, you get to hear somebody geek out about your music for a long time, because I really pride myself in how much I listen to the music that I review, and I get to know the artist. So I'm not just going to listen to the song or album that you pitch. I'm going to listen to your entire catalog of work, and I'm going to have thoughts and comments on it when you read the review or when you listen to the YouTube video. Whatever the case, you're going to hear about the artist and you're going to hear about them in detail. So if you're interested in being featured for 15 Minutes of Fame, hit me up and I will be happy to give you a listen. And make sure that you shout out Kayla in your submission. That way I can let her know that the referral came from her. So I'd love to just kind of show how this world is all connected,
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm always so curious how people like find my small corner of the internet. So
Yeah,
that would be interesting for
absolutely.
sure. Awesome. And
Absolutely.
I'll link everything in the description too, so it's easier for people to find, like your email address and the websites and
Perfect.
everything. So it should all be there eventually.
Yeah, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Of course, Jeff, this has been so lovely chatting with you about your album. Thank you so much for performing your song as well. That was really cool.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, and thank you for listening.
That's all for today's episode, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Jeff's album Evaporate is out now as of today, and you can win a limited vinyl for free by entering our giveaway on Instagram. Make sure to go to @JeffThomas, FMOF, or @The Morning Brew Podcast on Instagram for details. Jeff's socials, as well as his music, will be linked in the description below. Be sure to tune in next time for an exclusive interview with the Talbot brothers, live from Benny Thunder's Tap Room in Houston, Texas. Don't forget to subscribe!